All right, welcome back to Niners Nightly. And joining us on the show from Fox 13 Seattle is Curtis Crabtree as we get a little closer to Niners Hawks, which should be a hell of a matchup in Seattle. And of course, we're looking forward to it. And the winner's moving on to the NFC Championship game, and the loser's season comes to a close. Curtis, how are you?
I'm good. How's it going?
It's going great. Well, tell us a little bit about the late report that Sam Darnold's got this oblique injury. Doesn't sound like it's that serious. It doesn't sound like it's going to keep him out of the game. Is there anything to it, or is it just precautionary? What? Obviously, I'm sure if you're a Seahawk fan and you read that, you're like, oh my goodness, our starting quarterback's got an oblique injury before the biggest game of the year. What can you tell us?
Yeah, I mean, those of us who were there for it were a little bit caught off guard too, because he's been on the injury report so sparingly this year, period, and wasn't on it all week until today. And then right at the end of practice, the PR guy for the Seahawks comes up and says, Josh Jones is out and Sam Darnold's questionable with an oblique, and we're like Darnold's questionable? What? Can you explain this here? And so then we talked to Clint Kubiak, who gave us absolutely nothing, and so we're kind of like, what's going on here? And Sam still came out and talked to us and told us that he expects to play and all of that. But still, it's an oblique injury for a guy who will be making somewhat rotational movements, as the throwing motion's going to be. So I think you at least have to be like mildly worried about it just because of that. It does seem like it was just a tweak. And if, it doesn't, pop up to where he's struggling to get out of bed tomorrow morning and they're able to stay ahead of it and, get some anti-inflammatories in there, I think he's probably going to be just fine. And I think that's the thought that he has at the moment right now as well. But still, it's something that you probably would prefer wasn't the situation after your final practice of the week heading into the NFC playoffs.
Yeah. Did he say exactly how he heard it? Was on a practice rep, or was it?
Yeah.
Okay.
He was just throwing on air, kind of early individual warm up stuff, and all of a sudden just felt a little something in his left side. Now, if you're picking one side or the other for him, probably left side's better because it's not the throwing arm side. But even still, like it's some part of the motion there where you just, I'm sure they'll try to numb it up or something if they have to on Saturday as well, to where it doesn't catch on them and all of a sudden you're not finishing that throw you're expecting to, and the ball's not going quite where you want. I think all of those would be the concerns, the trickle down concerns of an injury like that, if it is actually going to be impactful for him on Saturday. But at least at the moment, it seems like it's pretty marginal.
Drew Lock is his backup, but there's also Jalen Milroe. I would imagine it would be Lock, and Lock did play in a handful of games this year, but he barely. I mean, it was basically mop-up work. He only attempted 3 passes all year. He did complete 2 of the 3, but he's on. He was a hell of a player at Missouri, and he's got an NFL arm and an NFL body. They're a hell of a team at the line of scrimmage, and they can run the heck out of the ball, and they got a great defense and special teams. It's not like, oh, Sam Darnold's out, Seahawks are done if he were out. How confident are you? How confident would Hawks fans be if Sam Darnold is a pregame scratch and they're going to Drew Lock? I mean, that's worst case scenario, but what would be the reaction among Seahawk fans and faithful up there?
I mean, I think they'd be, somewhat concerned about it because you're taking a guy who hasn't played basically all season and putting him in the biggest spot of the year. Now, a couple seasons ago, when he was here as a backup, he jumped into that game against Philadelphia in prime time, was able to beat the Eagles with a big late throw. He has as much ability to make the big throw as anybody in the league. Like, he's got legitimate arm talent. The problem is like he has the foul ball a little bit too often, and that's the kind of problem with Drew. I think is the long-term starting kind of candidate in the league, is that he just has a little bit too many mistakes that pop up for him to be that consistent starter, but his good is as good as anybody in the league. But still, playoff game, the best 8 teams left in the league, the margin for error is slim. And that would be a tough spot to kind of jump into this offense and play with these guys legitimately for the first time since probably training camp. So it'd be a tricky spot if that's the situation for them on Saturday.
Is he going to have his blindside protector? I know Charles Cross showed up on the injured list yesterday with a knee injury, which surprised a lot of people. I'd heard late today, I heard an interview as I was driving around that Brock Heward saying Cross is going to go. But you just said Josh Jones is out. He would be the starter if Cross couldn't go. What is the status there? So Cross starts, and who's his backup?
Yeah, I mean, effectively, there's only two guys on the roster that are on the injury report. Jones is out. Jones is not going to play. He dealt with that knee injury in the final game there against Week 18. I think he was questionable to play in that game and was able to gut through it. And I think this is a little bit of the trickle down effect of that from playing through it. But yeah, Charles Cross is off the injury report. He's back in the lineup. He's going to start this weekend. And then undrafted rookie, I think Amari Kite will probably be the backup. He's been the backup to Jones over the last few weeks when Cross has been out. He'll remain the backup now with Cross rejoining the starting lineup. But for the most part, they're pretty healthy going into this game. They're not going to activate either tight end Elijah Arroyo or depth linebacker Chaz Surratt off of injured reserve at this point in time. So the roster they've got is the roster they're going to go with this weekend. My hunch on that front is that they just didn't want to make the roster moves to put guys on waivers, to let guys go, given how healthy the roster is going into this week, but for either of those guys to rejoin the roster at this point in time. And they'll just see if an injury pops up to where they can swap out an injured reserve guy for an injured reserve guy next week if they keep advancing. But they're, for the most part, they're as healthy as you could expect to be 20 weeks into the season at this point.
This is Mike McDonald's first playoff game. Does he seem nervous this week? I mean, he's a terrific young coach, one of the best young defensive coaches in football, but this is new territory for him.
It is. He's trying to keep things as boring and this is a regular week as possible. Like that's kind of his stance. He's tried to not, get out of whack with that all season long about making one game more than the other. I mean, it's a typical coach cliches, right? Like Pete Carroll said very similar things throughout his tenure here in Seattle for a long, long time. But he basically said it, we're treating it like it's week 19 for them, week 20 this season. They're not changing anything with their practice structure. They're, other than doing Tuesday through Thursday instead of Wednesday through Friday because of the Saturday game. Like other than that, they're trying to keep everything the same. And why wouldn't you when you're 14-3 and have played really good football and have, I think their 3 losses are by like about a combined 10 points all season long. So like, why would you try to change anything and make it bigger than it is at this point? I think they feel pretty confident about where they're at.
Sure. They absolutely should. That was a thorough beating that they gave the 49ers in week 18, and they came out and they ran the ball. I mean, they really ran the ball. Kenneth Walker, Charbonnet. I mean, they did a really nice job running the ball, 4, 5, 6 yards a pop. And if if Sam Darnold has that kind of a run game, he's got JSN, who might be the best receiver going. Barner's a pretty clutch tight end. He's got more than enough to win this game and win the Super Bowl. Who's the star there though? Is I've heard an awful lot about Clint Kubiak, that he's going to get a head coaching job. I saw some speculation today that maybe Josh Williams will be hired by Matt Ryan in Atlanta, the 49ers executive, as the general manager, and he may hire Clint Kubiak as the head coach. Is Kubiak considered the star? Is he the big difference? Obviously Darnold is a huge difference from a year ago with Geno, but how much of it is Darnold? How much of the credit is being dropped at the feet of Clint Kubiak?
I mean, I think Kubiak runs a pretty good offense. It's that family of offenses that everybody wants to have right now in general. Yeah. And I mean, he knows it inside and out. Obviously, he's been around his dad and in that kind of style of system for a long, long time and kind of developed it himself, and the stops with Shanahan and other pieces across the league to kind of put his own flair on it. He's a very good offensive coach. I don't know that he's going to, win the press conference with anybody. Like he is as dry as it comes when it comes to speaking to us and talking to reporters and that sort of thing. And I mean, look, that's not imperative for you to be a successful head coach. You've got to win the guys in the locker room over more so than the guys in the press conferences. But I think because of how successful the offense has been, and particularly if they do go on this run here, like if you're an offensive coordinator of a Super Bowl advancing team or Super Bowl winning team or Final Four team, like, guess what? You're going to have interest because that's just kind of the way things work. So I certainly am not shocked by him getting as many interview requests as he is, particularly when they had the bye week last week. You have to kind of get those out of the way in order to interview him again later on as a second interview. So I think it makes all the sense in the world that he had those interviews and those first stage steps. That whether he ultimately gets a job at the end of the day, it'll depend on if he's able to win over, I think, an ownership and have the right kind of setup to go from his off.
We're talking to Curtis Crabtree.
He's there for sure.
We're talking to Curtis. Sorry to interrupt you. We're talking to Curtis Crabtree from Fox 13 in Seattle on the Yuma guest line as we get you ready for the Niners and the Hawks on the Sports Leader. Let's flip the card and talk about this defense. It's a base 3-4 front. They got some great personnel. I was asking Shanahan about this defense, and he's like, the reason they're so good is that they're year 2 in the scheme, and they've got great talent, but they also have great talent that is, in a lot of ways, ideally suited for this defense. And I thought when he said that, he didn't name specific guys, but I think he's talking about guys like Leonard Williams and Byron Murphy up front. I think he's talking about Drake Thomas at the weak side spot. He's 5'11", 5'10", whatever, but he can fly. I think he's talking about Eman Wari as the nickel who can play on all 3 levels and impact the game in a lot of different ways. And probably even a little bit about Julian Love. How do you see this defense? It's an awesome defense, maybe the best in the league outside of Houston. Where do you saw them in 13? How does this defense compare to the Legion of Boom and Bennett and Averill and all those guys they had back then?
They're both really good defenses, but the way they do it's completely different. Like that, the Legion of Boom was obviously led by its back end, its back 7 with that secondary, and KJ Wright and Bobby Wagner were kind of the main focus. Not to discount your Cliff Averill, Michael Bennett types on the line of scrimmage, because they certainly factored into it. But
Sure.
So much of that team came from the back end. This team's the opposite. As you mentioned, Leonard Williams, Byron Murphy, they eat up double teams left and right and throw guys around like nothing. It's a very strong front. DeMarcus Lawrence and Derek Hall, those are strong end pieces on the edge of the line of scrimmage as well. So, watch Byron Murphy play. He drops a knee down. He'll anchor against two linemen and just kind of take them up and just go nowhere. And runs go to die with those guys up front there. It's one reason they've been so successful stopping opposing running games all season long. And then everything else kind of comes from that versatility in the back end. As you mentioned, the fact that Devin Witherspoon and Nicky Manwari can bounce around that nickel role and do different things from that spot. Mike McDonald called it this week essentially like a base 4-3 where Eman Wari is like the strong Sam linebacker in their kind of the way that they function with things. And ultimately, like, the way that they play up front, with them to play 2 high safety coverages most of the time and be that undersized at the second level with Drake Thomas and Nick Emanwari, as you kind of alluded to there, you have to have dudes up front that are causing problems or you're going to get run on all day. And for them to be a top 5 rushing defense with the kind of second level as undersized as they are, that defensive line needs to carry the mail, and they do. And everything else kind of goes off of that because they can keep 7 in coverage. It kind of reminds me of like the Michael Strahan, Osi York kind of Giants teams that won with their front 4 all the time. Everything else kind of play off that. But if you win with your front 4, that's a massive leg up in the NFL. And they do that a lot of the time. Even if like there's not a standout edge rusher part of it, they don't absolutely rack up sacks left and right. They still win the line of scrimmage pretty regularly.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so impressed by John Schneider and the way he built this thing. It's awesome. It really is. I mean, they'll keep 2 safeties deep and take away the run.
Yes.
I mean, they give you that pre-snap look like we got 2 guys deep and you're not going deep, so you're going to be operating in like a 12-yard shell. And then in that Week 18 game, every time Brock Purdy was, had somebody open, even if the guy was open, the Seahawk defender had 2 or 3 steps towards closing it down, and there was 0 run after the catch. The Niners in this game against Philadelphia had a ton of yards after the catch. I think it was 139 yards after the catch. It's hard to envision the 49ers getting that kind of yardage or anything close to it unless there's some kind of a broken play or somebody slips down. There's not a lot of room when you're playing the Seahawks for sure. And it certainly wasn't in Week 18.
Yeah, I mean, they don't blitz very often because they don't have to. Like, they can keep the 7 in coverage, cover things up on the back end, disrupt things with their front 4. Like, they only bring the extra piece if they want to, because it's not like they need to create their pressure and collapse the pocket and do things to make an opposing quarterback uncomfortable. So, yeah, if you have more guys in the back end covering things because you don't need to force the issue at the line of scrimmage, bring in an extra guy more than you want to, like it's a cheat code. If you can rush and disrupt with 4 guys on the line of scrimmage, it frees up so much of what you can do defensively. And going back to the Legion of Boom, they used to do it because they had a star center field safety and Earl Thomas and corners that can cover on the outside. A lot of room with Sherman and Maxwell and Browner and those types of guys to where they could have Cam Chancellor come down as that extra safety in the box to stop the run with the 8th guy there and cover the back end, maybe down a guy. These guys do it the inverse way, where they keep the extra safety back and then still dominate the run with the 4 guys up front. So it's a completely different way of playing dominant defense. And that's why I think they don't want to be compared to the Legion of Boom in quite the same way, because they do it so differently, and why they've come up with their own dark side moniker for this particular defense. But they are really good for sure.
And they are really, really good for sure. There's no question about that. Here's the only question I would have. Are they overconfident? I mean, they dominated the Niners in such a way in week 18 that I wouldn't fault them if they came into this game a little overconfident.
I don't know that I don't get a sense of overconfidence from it. I just think they trust in what they can do. I don't think they're being cocky about things or popping off. I just think they know who they are. They're confident that they can play to that level more often than not. If they give up a play, they'll come back and shut down the next one. I don't think they have a ton of concern about the way that they play in that regard, because they've shown all year such an ability to do that. Basically, the one time it's happened where they got kind of gashed this year was that Rams game on Thursday night, and that was a short week, and that can be some funky things happening at that point in time when you're playing 3 days later or whatever it is. And I think similarly, I expect this game to probably be more scoring than the last one between the 49ers and Seahawks. I don't expect 13-3. But if it happened to where the Seahawks and Rams met again next week, I don't think that one's going to be quite the shootout it was in the latter part of the season either. So it's one of those weird things where you can play basically 2 games back to back against the same team, and they can look different. I think that's one thing you're gonna see this weekend. I do think there's going to be a little bit more scoring from both teams this weekend, even if the defensive play of the Seahawks doesn't feel all that much different.
Do the Hawks have a primary concern? Or what would you say if I said to a diehard Hawks fan, hey, you know what? Give me your number one concern. When you say, you know what? We're not concerned. We're just, we're that good. Or, because like Philly, you had a major talent advantage on the Niners last week, but there were some people that were concerned about their offensive coordinator and basically their chemistry, and people thought there was some dysfunction there. Is there any issue or any concern at all on Seattle's side?
I think if the Seahawks and 49ers play clean football, I think the Seahawks win that matchup going away most of the time, maybe like 90% of the time. If you give the ball away and you create some short field circumstances and have those key turnovers at the wrong moment, all of a sudden that can take a game you're dominating, like week 18, if Gross Matos had recovered that fumble, and now all of a sudden you put a quick 7 on the board, the game could look a whole lot different, right? So turnovers can always be an equalizer in games like this. I think over the long run, with where the health situation is of the 49ers and Seahawks, if they play this game 100 times, I think the Seahawks win it a high amount of the time in that circumstance. But it's a 60-minute game, and if you have a couple interceptions get away, you lose a fumble, something, give a short field, and now all of a sudden momentum can flip. Like, things like that can certainly happen to kind of set you off. And you talked about Seattle's running game. If we want to get to like one particular area, they've been a lot better the last 3-4 weeks or so. But for a lot of the season, it wasn't going very well. So if somehow the 49ers, and I know their run defense has struggled for a while because of injuries and such here too, if they were able to somehow show up and keep Ken Walker and Zach Charbonnet in check here a little bit this weekend, it's going to force somebody probably other than Jackson Smith and Jigba to contribute enough in the passing game for them to come out on the backside of this with a win. And that would be the one thing, because Rashid Shaheed hasn't had many catches since he's gotten here. He affects things in coverage because of his speed. You have to respect it, his ability to go deep and everything, but the numbers haven't been there all that much. Cooper Kupp is a possession receiver now. He doesn't have that high end, ceiling that he did when he was in his peak with the Rams. He's a little bit, further along in his career and all that, but he can still make a big catch now and then. AJ Barner's actually had a really solid season as a tight end for them, but there's still quite a bit of a delta between Jackson Smith and Jigba and what the rest of that offense can give you. And that would be the one thing I think I would kind of put I'd put either the turnovers getting them, or if the 49ers shut down the run game enough to where they have to force the issue in the passing game and it comes back to bite them.
How's the fans? I know they have, the 12s and all the, all the talk about how great their fans are. But, there was an article that came out this week about how the Seahawks were saying, don't sell your tickets to Niner fans. And that got picked up on down here. And a Seahawks fan was like, hey, man, I'll sell them to whoever I want to sell them to. They will revoke your season tickets if you sell your tickets to Niner fans? Really?
I think
that can't be true.
I think it's a little bit over. I think they're trying to find a way to cut down on the amount of ticket brokers, season ticket holders that are out there, and basically try to say, like, we want our fans in the building for the big games. Like, if you're selling a couple games a season, I don't think they're going to bat an ay at you. Maybe they send out the warning letter to everybody just to cover bases. But, like, if this is the one game of the year that you're selling your tickets, I don't think you need to worry about it. It would be guys or, accounts that are selling 6, 7 plus games a season that might have to answer some questions about that down the line. But because it has been a factor last several years or so. You've had a lot of opposing fans in here from some certain games. Well, the Seahawks have been on a little bit of a down slide, not quite played to the peak that they were during the peak of the Pete Carroll era. But I think that's basically the gist of what they're trying to do there, is to try to get some more of their season ticket fan into the hands of Seahawks fans, and going about it with that in mind.
All right, let's finish big with 3 quick questions. Most underrated Seattle Seahawk in the mind of Curtis Crabtree is who?
Ooh, I would have said like a month ago probably Nick Emenwari, but I think he's gotten a lot of pub recently and come along in a long way. I'll say maybe Uchenna Nwosu. Uchenna Nwosu, like, he's a really solid edge player for them, and he's not going to have 15 sacks in a season, but he does everything really, really well, and kind of his ability to set the edge and in the run game and all of those sorts of things kind of help that whole picture kind of come together on the line of scrimmage. So I think he would be one, at least on the defensive side of the ball, that I would mention. And I'll give you one on offense too, just for giggles. I think it's AJ Barner. I think Barner's had a really, really nice season for them. A guy who I don't think they saw, when he was drafted, I don't think there was a thought that there was a ton of offensive upside to his game, but he's a pretty solid all-around tight end for them at this point in time. So I think those are the 2 guys I would kind of point out there. And Drake Thomas as well, who you mentioned earlier, has had a very nice season jumping into the starting line.
No question. He's been far greater here than with the Raiders. Okay. The Seahawk player that Seahawk fans take most issue with.
Ooh.
In a good year, it's hard to find a guy sometimes.
Anthony Bradford, the right guard. I think he's the one guy that people tend to jump on pretty heavily because, look, he's a big dude. When he gets his hands on you, you're done. But there's times where he doesn't come close to getting his hands on you. Like, he'll whiff pretty spectacularly at certain moments. And if you think back to Week 18, I think the 49ers brought a blitz that got through like immediately when it was the play D. Winters got hurt, because he got into the backfield immediately and got stepped on. But because Bradford, there was a missed call at the line of scrimmage. I think whether it was a miscommunication with the line call or whatever, Bradford's blocking nobody over here, and Winters runs right past him to get an immediate pressure on Darnold, and Darnold actually gets out of it, scrambles for a few yards. But, like, you see those types of plays come up pretty regularly throughout the season. His bad can look pretty bad, and I think fans have latched onto that pretty highly.
Okay, last one. Your boss at Fox calls you and said, Curtis, I'm giving you an hour to talk Seahawks, but I need you to get 3 guys to fill that hour, 3 players that you got to interview. Who are the 3 best interviews in that locker room that you're going to say, you know what? This is not the best players on the team or the guys who have the best stats, but these are the guys that are going to make the best hour-long show because they're great talkers.
I would say Leonard Williams is right up there for sure. He's a very good interview this season. Julian Love won our chapter's Good Guy Award for last year, for dealing with the media. He's great to talk with for, long stretches of time as well. I mean, there's actually quite a few good guys to chat with in the locker room too. Those guys would be at the top of my list. And on offensive side, I actually enjoyed talking to Jackson Smith and Jigba quite a bit too. I don't know if he's necessarily the most engaging interview per se. It's all kind of in the eye of the beholder, right? But I'll throw a curveball for that one. So I'll say Abe Lucas, the right tackle. I think he gives you pretty honest answers and can give you some real good insight into the team. So I'll go with Julian, Leonard Williams, and Abe Lucas.
That's good. Yeah, you got to throw an O lineman in there because universally O linemen are just great. I don't know why. They're just great. They're very analytical. They're very intelligent. They're really, really good talkers usually across the board. All right, let's say you guys win it all. Last one before we let you go. You guys win it all. Okay, you're now on the podium. They're having the parade. Who who deserves the most credit for the Seahawks championship if they win the championship? Is it Mike McDonald who just came over here? Is it John Schneider who hired Mike McDonald? Is it the owner who stayed with John Schneider instead of dumping him with Pete Carroll? Is it Sam Darnold? Who is it? This defense overall? I mean, is it Ernest Jones? Who will deserve the most credit if this team wins it all?
I think it's probably John Schneider. To go from having the first Super Bowl winning coach in your franchise's history, able to make a case that you need to make a change, being entrusted to make that change, and then going out and hitting on the next coach after that, to then kind of lead to everything down the line here, not to mention the decision to pull the parachute on Geno Smith and DK Metcalf and move in a different direction on those guys. And as you mentioned, Drake Thomas was the guy that I think they got off a waiver claim to add into this mix. The draft that they've had here with Gray Zabel starting every game on the offensive line and Nick Emenwari looking like he's got a immense upside as a defensive star in this league. Not to mention some of the offensive line additions that they've made over the last couple of years, contributing in to the mix with Lucas and Charles Cross and Ken Walker and Jackson Smith and Jigba and Devin Witherspoon. They've kind of come back around and hit on a lot of draft picks recently as well. So I think he put the entire puzzle together, and I think a lot of it lands with John Schneider for sure, just because that's different levels of the team. You all kind of have to hit right. You have to convince the owner that, we need to make the change with Pete, hit on the next coach that you bring in, make the roster moves that you do, some big trades, some big draft picks, all kind of mixed in there. They've done a lot right to get back to this point.
No doubt. I'm with you. I think John Schneider deserves the credit. Curtis, thanks for jumping on KBR. We appreciate you.
Thanks, Larry. Appreciate it.
Curtis Crabtree, Fox 13 up in Seattle. Niners and Hawks. Man, what a weekend it's going to be on the Sports Leader.